Hello everyone, this is Diane. I have two completed journals to show you today. We're going to do a flip through, and these journals are in my shop when this video goes up. So you can, if you like these journals, you can click on the link which is in the description box below. You may have to click on the show more button there in the description, and these will be there, and if someone gets there first and they're not there, well, it's just because someone already got them. But they will be in the shop when this video goes up. I'm calling them Folk Art Flowers and Folk Art Rooster. These are fabric covered. There's cardstock in there, so there's a little bit of stability to them. And the front, let's do this one first. The front part of the cover, the outside of the cover, is covered with this fabric that was a pillow cover. It's sturdy. I think it was a homemade pillow cover, and it had a zipper, a metal zipper on one end of it. So it was a throw pillow, I believe. I got it at a flea market, and I love the colors and I love the design, this folk art look, and it even looks like it was embroidered with a chain stitch, but it's just printed on there. And the insides are covered with a piece of tablecloth with all these really pretty images. So I use both of those elements on both of the covers. So this one, the focus of the cover is this bowl of flowers, and I did all kinds of embellishing on the front with some vintage doilies and some trims and some buttons, and a little bit on the back too, just for some interest. And I sewed a piece of seam binding to the inside cover so you can tie them closed. I added a book plate right there. This is a wallpaper digital from, it's Sears wallpaper from TLC Creates Vintage. And I stenciled on that. There's some coffee dyed paper, and I used some of the pieces from this fabric to make some embellishments for the page. I just sewed that on there, added some trim, did a little bit of stamping, not much. And this is, I don't know what the paper line is, but I had these already printed in my stash, and the colors and style were good with these journals, so I'll see if I can find out what they are and where they got them and link them below if you're interested. I made this pocket here with some cardstock and a die that cuts that edge, and this piece was actually cut with a die also. I just used some scraps of coffee dyed scrapbook paper and used some Tim Holtz dies, and then I just flipped it over and glued it on there with Tim Holtz bird there. There's a fabric ruffle that someone sent me in a Happy Mail. I made some fabric flips, and I used again that fabric that's on the front and some other vintage fabrics. And this is a linen that I actually have in my collection. I just printed it, made a copy of it. And you can write on this, and added a ephemera piece. This is coffee dyed scrapbook paper. This is a stamped image. I just stamped it on cardstock and cut it out, glued it on as a pocket, and added a couple of pieces. This is a printable in my shop. And this is a children's book page. It's some French songs, so you can see some of the lyrics there in French. And I added a tab that I made out of vintage linen scraps and a button. And this just claps open. You can write on that. And I added some printed ribbon there, and this ticket stub or receipt stub or something that's in German. Someone sent that to me. I made this pocket with cardstock and very vintage music, very brittle, and I added some modeling paste through a stencil and then glued it down. And that's the only thing I can do with that brittle paper, is just glue it down to something. I added this embellishment And this was in my stash of journal cards that I had made quite some time ago. So I put that in there. This is a genuine Victorian calling card. It's in excellent condition, and when you, oh, it goes that way. When you open it, lift it, it has a name. So when you clip it on here, just be careful that you don't catch it on. Oh, I just broke that. So I'm going to glue her hand down. You'll still be able to lift up the flowers. I was just going to tell you to be careful with it. They are quite fragile. And then hook it on. I made a little tab here with a scrap of cross-stitch fabric. Still can't remember what it's called. And a piece of that trim. Just some craft paper here, and I added a stamped label and just a scrap of paper. This is the flyleaf of a children's book. There's some of my wallpaper I made a digital of. And this is just a snippet that someone made me, sent it in a Happy Mail, and it's just glued together pieces of scraps. And I just sewed it on, and I made it a little tuck spot, added this wildflower embellishment, and tucked in this tag that I had made a while ago. It was in my stash. We have a vintage computer card here, and I inked around it and sewed it on and added this vintage daisy trim. And this is a Victorian image too. This was in a Victorian scrapbook. You can write on the back of it. And a vintage coupon that you could collect and redeem for silverware. You collected it from Sears Oil Company. So that is a genuine vintage article. I use quite a few vintage pieces in these journals. In the center of the signature we have a current fold-a-note. I think it's by current, but anyway, it's a fold-a-note. You can open that up and write on it. And you can put a clip on there to hold it shut if you want to. There's some of that pretty printed trim. Some old ledger paper. This is a paper clip that I made. I embellished with an image from a vintage magazine of Brock's malted milk balls. So that piece is vintage, and then these two pieces are vintage. I chose this because it's green and our colors are blue and green. So we have the a receipt from the Owego Livestock Market. Someone purchased one cow, and there's the weight, and they paid $141. And it has some writing on the back. And then this is a handwritten card. I found this in a bunch of ephemera, and it was some quotes that this woman wrote. I think I could turn and live with animals. They are so placid and self-contained. They do not sweat and whine about their condition. Not one is dissatisfied. Not one is demented with the mania of owning things. Not one is respectable. No. That's what it says. Not one is respectable or unhappy over the whole world. Walt Whitman. And then another label that I stamped. Another fabric flip. And a crocheted cotton trim tab there. This is a vintage postcard that was very damaged, and I glued stuff on top of it. I had two cards that were damaged, and I embellished them and added to them to make them pretty again, and they've been in my stash for a long time. So I used them both. This is dated 1947. You do get the back part of the postcard with the very tiny writing on there, and the stamp and the postmark. So there's that, and you'll see the other one in the other journal. This is a merchandise tag, and I just added some rosettes to it and made it a tuck spot. I got the idea for putting rosettes on the merchandise tag from Lorna Taylor at Tailor Made Journals. Thank you, Lorna. She makes beautiful journals, and she makes beautiful digitals. This is a piece of the tablecloth. This tablecloth, you can see those flowers in the background. Part of the tablecloth had just the light blue flowers, which was really pretty. So I made a pocket out of it with some vintage rickrack. And in the pocket I tucked this. This is a digital from my shop. And you could see on the printed piece that it was kind of crumpled there, so I used my fingers and just crumpled it up there. But otherwise it was in good condition, so I didn't rough it up, and I just inked it a little bit. And these two pieces were sent to me in a Happy Mail that someone else made. And this is a really cool one. Book page. It looks like a letter. There's a place to put an address. It's got some pretty embellishments, a homemade postage stamp. And when you open it up, you have paper to write on. So that's a really neat way to use a book page. I just sewed a piece of a linen doily piece on that side of the music page, and a little piece of a vintage trim there. Here, this is a digital, and I just glued that there. You can write on it. And this is a little pocket that I made with my Cricut, and just added some rickrack. And the cards go in there, one with the tab facing one way and one with the tab facing the other way, so that they fit into those thumb holes. So I left one blank, and the one that's in the front, I added a vintage calling card. So this is a real vintage calling card. And this one is a pocket or an envelope that was a digital, and I printed it a long time ago, and I have no idea where it came from, whose shop it was or anything. But I thought it was perfect color for this, so I added it. And then this is another antique piece from a Victorian scrapbook. You can see where it was glued into a book. It's a New Year's greeting card, but I liked the colors for this book. I just tucked it behind. This is a tag that I made with vintage wallpapers and the vintage music paper with the stenciling with modeling paste. And then on the back I added a piece of the printed trim because there were two separate pieces here, so there was a raw edge there. And another pocket that I embellished, and this is a digital tag that I had left over from my autumn journals. So this is Folk Art Flowers. The next journal is a Folk Art Rooster, and I'll go through this more quickly. All the elements look different because, you know, they're vintage, so they're all different, but same types of things. There was a stain here, so I made sure I covered that stain up. Not that I mind. Usually I don't mind if there's a stain on a vintage linen. You can see the buttons. There's the tablecloth. Now this is a pocket that I made, and then this is a ledger from 1825. So that's really old, and that's a digital. We have a vintage card inside. I don't know if I showed that vintage card in the other book, but they both have the same card with an envelope. It's just a note card, but it opens up fully, so there's lots of writing space. And a tag that I made a while ago with wallpaper and a Mrs. Cog image. There's a button on this. This is a piece of a quilted, well, it was a piece of a quilt, just a scrap, and I added a button to it. Again, an antique calling card. This one doesn't have a piece that lifts up. Look how beautiful that is. I do have digitals of these calling cards in my shop. Children's book page, really beautiful illustrations. This is one of the wallpapers that I own. I've made a digital of it. And there's that. I have digitals of these French seed packets too, just the labels. And another snippet that the same person made and sent to me, and it's got a little vase stamped on some fabric and added to it, which is really fun. This is a vintage card from Buckley's Restaurant. Buckley's Sizzling Steak. Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin. It's air conditioned. And some vintage trim at the top, the daisy trim. And another one of the Victorian flower cards and the silverware coupon. And this paper clip is a vintage Jello image from a magazine. And again, I chose some vintage green ephemera, and this one is a check from 1975. It's a paycheck from the Pittsburgh and Lake Erie Railroad Company. And there's somebody's signature there. And then this is just another note, postcard. It was glued into a scrapbook, 1947. And here's the other damaged postcard that I repaired. This one was just damaged on one end, and it's not used. It's another pocket made with the tablecloth piece, and another piece that was sent to me in a Happy Mail of some succulents. And this is one of my printables. This is from 1888. I have the original piece, and you could see the fold lines on it, so I folded it on those lines and then just inked around it. And then another tag that I made with wallpaper and the 1825. You can see the date right there. And that's a real piece. That's not a printable. It was a ledger that someone, once it was filled up, someone used it as a scrapbook and glued stuff on top of the ledger. And I got it all falling apart in really bad condition from a flea market. And I was able to salvage some of the parts that were written on in the early 1800s. There's another real calling card on that. There are 15 folded pages, including the center post-it note, so there's a lot of writing space. This is another item that someone made and sent to me. and I glued it on so that you could tuck something behind it. She had added these tags into it. I just put the seam binding on that one. This is really pretty. And then I added a vintage card behind it, and it is a advertising card for coffee. So that's Victorian era also. And on the back, again, we have the trim covering up the raw edge. Looks like there's something behind this, you know, like that belongs in there or that's coming out of there, but it's just part of the print. Just this black thing showed up in that spot there. So whatever was laying next to this picture is there. And this is a digital receipt here, I believe. Yeah, that's digital. And this is also a digital. This is in my shop. I think this is in the tags and receipts. Tags, tickets, and I don't know. Can't remember, but it's got tags and tickets. And this was added in there. It's an envelope that I have in my collection for photograph corners, but it was shaped like that, so I put it in with the tags. And that is it. The Folk Art Rooster and the Folk Art Flowers journals are now in my shop. These were a great joy to make. I hope you enjoy seeing them. And I will see you for the next project. I don't know what it is yet. Let's find out together. See you soon. Have a creative day today. Bye-bye.